Good morning, folks.
Morning.
Morning.
Welcome back. Hope you're doing okay. And I hope you had a frightfully good Halloween. All right, welcome back, everyone, as we get started. Okay, so I was just looking at our syllabus this morning, just to review our schedule. And believe it or not, today's November 1st. Can you believe that? It's November 1st. And even if we include this week's classes, you have a total of 6 weeks worth of lecture left and then a week of final exams, right? I mean, you are on the downhill slope, okay? So let that motivate you for a good ending to the course. Okay, so we're going to finish off our coverage of chapter 6 today and hopefully start chapter 7 as well. Excuse me, chapter 9. We'll be going from chapter 6 to chapter 9. And also, I know the most immediate thing on your mind is probably the upcoming lab exam this week, and that's appropriate. But please be aware that your next lecture exam is scheduled from 2 weeks from today. That would be Monday, November 15th. So in 2 weeks from today, we'll be taking lecture exam 2. And so please be advised that later today, I will be posting the study guide for lecture exam 2 in the lecture portion of Wiley Plus, okay? So just keep that in the back of your mind that the study guide is going to be released later today. Do you have any questions right now?
Are we also to go from chapter 6 to chapter 9 in our personal studies as well?
Yes, we will not be covering chapters 7 and 8 formally, and you won't be tested on that. So please do that during your private study time.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Okay, gang, let's continue then. So the last major topic that we need to talk about here is vitamin D synthesis and its role in regulating calcium homeostasis in the body. Okay, this is a big, important topic. And as I begin to share my screen with you, I don't mind telling you that what I'm going to be covering with you this morning is definitely going to be a major essay on lecture exam 2 in 2 weeks. Okay, so it's something you really want to pay attention to here because it will be a major testing point 2 weeks from today. Okay, so getting set up here. Let's see. There we go. All right, so vitamin D synthesis and calcium homeostasis. Okay, vitamin D synthesis is talked a little bit about in chapter 5. Okay, we're currently in chapter 6, but it is talked about a little bit in chapter 5. Hold on a second. Courtney, I see your comment in the chat window, so I'm gonna ask everyone else to comment in the chat window. Please give me some feedback in the chat window. Is the audio okay? Are you hearing me okay?
I mean, sometimes like it's good, and then like the others, it just keeps like going in and out, but then it comes back.
Right.
So like spaces it out.
So Courtney, take a look at the answers to my question in the chat window. It seems that most students are hearing me okay, which suggests that the problem is on your end. In other words, there's a technology issue on your end. Maybe it's an internet bandwidth thing. I just don't know. So do your best. Just do your best. There's nothing that I can do on my end to fix that for you. So hang in there. Okay, folks. All right. So let's begin here. As I said, the synthesis of vitamin D is talked about a little bit in chapter 5. And the calcium homeostasis is a major talking point here in chapter 6. So I'm going to kind of link these two topics together, okay? All right, so let's start with the synthesis of vitamin D. Okay. Okay. So right now, probably the most useful page number for you to be looking at is somewhere around pages 195 and 196. If you can isolate the textbook heading in chapter 6, which says bone's role in calcium homeostasis, that would be a reasonable talking point at this moment, a reasonable reference point. Okay. So synthesis of vitamin D. Okay. First thing, okay, so we have to start somewhere here, okay? And I think I've made the comment in previous lectures that vitamin D is not made in your skin as many people think. It actually is manufactured in the kidneys. However, there is a whole bunch of events that happen before the kidneys, including events in the skin, that are needed to occur to enable the ultimate synthesis of vitamin D. Okay, so before I begin here, let me give you a little bit of background on this. All right, so when we talk about vitamin D, please understand that the phrase vitamin D actually refers to a group or family of molecules. It does not refer to one single individual molecule. That is probably the first talking point that many folks don't appreciate. The term vitamin D is really referring to a group of molecules, not one molecule. Okay. If we talk about vitamin D as a group of molecules, well, each member of this group of molecules is going to have its own name. Okay. Just like each member of your family has his or her own name, correct? So the specific molecule of the vitamin D family, which is most important for the physiology of our body, the specific member of the vitamin D family that is responsible for activating calcium absorption in the small intestine, is actually a molecule by the name of calcitriol. Okay. Okay, so go ahead and read that, and I'll just state it again here for you. The physiologically active version of vitamin D, which is responsible for promoting calcium absorption in the small intestine, is called calcitriol. And I'll be sharing with you its chemical structure in just a few moments, okay? And finally, there's one more piece of background information I would say to you. You know, vitamin D is named a vitamin, right? I mean, it's got the word vitamin in the name. Vitamin D, it's got the name vitamin and it's got the word vitamin in its name. Well, there's something odd about that you need to be aware of. The definition of a vitamin is any substance that the body needs but is not capable of manufacturing for itself. Let's start there, okay? Okay, so one more time, the definition of the term vitamin is any substance that the body needs but cannot make for itself. Okay, so a vitamin is anything that you're going to have to get in your diet. That's the proper definition of vitamin. Now, vitamin D is a problem because vitamin D can be made by the body. Vitamin D can be made by the body, which means that vitamin D is actually mislabeled. It is mislabeled, okay? Because vitamin D can be manufactured by the body, vitamin D is technically not a vitamin. Isn't that irritating? Okay, so here again, we have this issue of the history of a field where an error was made at some point in history, and rather than correcting the error and moving forward, we have, as a civilization, we have decided to just hold on to the error and continue to propagate it through the semesters, through the years of instruction, and we continue to call it vitamin D. Vitamin D is not a vitamin. It is not a vitamin, even though we call it a vitamin, okay? And so you might ask yourself, well, if it's not a vitamin, what the heck is it? Well, from a biochemical perspective, vitamin D is a steroid hormone. Okay, so I'll put it this way. So if vitamin D is not really a vitamin, what is it? And the simple answer is a steroid hormone. Okay. So I appreciate that many of you have not had endocrinology yet, and endocrinology is a topic you'll get in AMP2. And when you get in AMP2, you'll appreciate that hormones typically come in two varieties. They come in the water-soluble variety, which is always made of a protein, or they come in a lipid-soluble variety, which is almost always based on steroids. Okay? So vitamin D is not a vitamin, even though we call it a vitamin because of a historical inaccuracy that's been propagated through time. From a biochemical perspective, vitamin D is not a vitamin, it is a steroid hormone. Okay. Okay, good news, Courtney. Thanks for letting me know. All right. Okay, folks. So let's see here. Vitamin D is a family. Vitamin D is a family of molecules. It's not an individual molecule. Of the vitamin D family, the specific member which is physiologically relevant for promoting calcium absorption in our body is called calcitriol. Vitamin D is technically not a vitamin. It is a steroid hormone. Okay. Folks, do you have any questions about that? Because I know that can be confusing. Some of the talking points we're talking about here can be confusing. Are you okay? All right, please let me know if you have any questions, okay? Because I want you to understand what's going on here, okay? All right, and all right, thanks for the feedback in the chat window. That does help me. It helps me to know whether I need to slow down, okay? All right. All right, so now let's continue here. Let's talk about the actual manufacturing of vitamin D in the body. Okay, so we have to start somewhere, and the most reasonable place to start for this conversation is going to be your skin. So I'm going to be putting some chemical structures in your notes today. I don't want you to get scared or intimidated by them. I will not be testing you on the chemical structures. I will not, but I would like you to at least have seen them at one moment of your life, okay? So don't worry about the chemistry, but just pay attention during our conversation here. So embedded in the plasma membrane of your skin cells, and that's going to include cells of the epidermis and cells of the dermis. So embedded in the plasma membrane of your skin cells is a special substance which is called 7-dehydrocholesterol. Okay. Okay. Embedded in the plasma membrane of your skin cells, both epidermal and dermal cells, is a substance called 7-dehydrocholesterol. Okay, not T, 7. There we go. Okay, so as we go along here, I want to try to slow down and definitely underline things that you really need to pay attention to here. Okay, so while I will not be asking you intimate details about the chemistry of these molecules, certainly I would expect you to know their names, right? So 7-dehydrocholesterol is something you want to pay attention to, and you want to pay attention to the fact that our conversation is beginning in your skin cells, right? All right, so let me bring up the chemical structure of this molecule, and forgive me for a moment, I'm going to switch to a different computer application to pull out this chemical structure and paste it into your notes, okay? Hold on a second. I need to have 5 monitors here and only have 1. Okay, all right. So let's do this. All right, this big monstrosity here on your screen is the substance I'm talking about. Now I'm going to shrink its image in just a moment, but I would like to point out, notice that, I know many of you probably have not had yet a proper chemistry course, and even fewer of you have had what's known as an organic chemistry course. That might be in your future, depending on what your educational pathway takes you. But long story short, right, notice these rings. Notice these rings, right? We have 4 rings that seem to be fused together. This is very characteristic of lipid chemistry. And also, since cholesterol is a lipid, this originates from cholesterol in your body. So 7-dehydrocholesterol comes from the cholesterol in your body, okay? And every place where you see 2 lines to come together into a point, there is an implied carbon atom present, right? So there's a whole bunch of carbon atoms around the ring. So let me ask you a question in the chat window here. Here we go. In the bottom leftmost ring structure on the screen, how many carbon atoms are present? Okay, all right. It is in fact 6, right? It is in fact 6, and I see that some of you didn't get that correct. So let me see if I can momentarily highlight that. Okay, so for example, what I'm talking about is this. Hold on a sec. Okay, so just take a look on your screen, folks. Here we go. We're going to count the carbon atoms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? There are 6 implied carbon atoms in this single ring, okay? Question in the chat window. Do the carbon atoms make sense now that I've highlighted them in green? Okay, all right, good. right, folks. So now you know just a little bit of how to interpret the structure of this molecule. Again, every place where two lines come together into a point, into a vertex, is where you're going to find a carbon atom. It's kind of a shorthand way that chemists use to draw out complicated chemical structures, okay? So I'm going to erase those green things now because I want to shrink up this structure into your notes, okay? All right. And I will continue. Okay. So let me shrink this beast down here. Okay. All right. So that is 7-dehydrocholesterol, which again originates from cholesterol in your body. We're going to start a conversation with this molecule that's found in the plasma membrane of your skin cells. Next, you know, it is true that you can absorb some vitamin D from your diet. That is true. However, think about the world that our ancestors lived in. It was not a world where they could conveniently access a grocery store, right? Okay, so 300 years ago, yeah, you would be hard pressed to go out and find a giant so that you could pick up all kinds of tasty foods. My point is that our ancestors lived in an environment where access to nutritious materials, nutritious foods on a consistent basis was pretty limited. And so Mother Nature created our bodies to have the capacity to manufacture much of what it needs, and vitamin D is no different, which is why you should be outside exercising, soaking up some sunshine, you know, on a weekly basis, because the manufacturing of vitamin D requires sunlight to strike the surface of your skin. So this is our next point. When sunlight strikes the surface of the skin, some of the photons of light, right? Light is made of photons. Hopefully you know that if you've had a chemistry or physics course at any part in your history. Light is made of these discrete packets of energy called photons. At any rate, photons are part of the ultraviolet radiation that the sun releases from its surface from the intense heat and pressure of the nuclear processes happening in our star that we call the sun. So when sunlight strikes the surface of the skin, some of the photons slam into this 7-dehydrocholesterol molecule and alter the structure of the molecule. What I'm saying to you is when sunlight strikes the 7-dehydrocholesterol, the 7-dehydrocholesterol has its structure changed so that it becomes a new and different molecule. The new molecule that's manufactured by altering the structure of 7-dehydrocholesterol is known as cholecalciferol. Cholecalciferol, which some of you might be aware of, is also known as vitamin D3. Okay, so once again, in a shortened version, when sunlight strikes the surface of your skin, some of the photons of light penetrate your epidermal and dermal skin cells and bump into this molecule we call 7-dehydrocholesterol. When these photons of light hit the 7-dehydrocholesterol, they alter the structure of the molecule, effectively changing it into a new molecule. The new molecule that is made is called cholecalciferol. Okay, and I'm going to show you what the structure of cholecalciferol looks like. Okay, I think I'm going to run out of space here in my notes for this big complicated structure. So I'm going to already put this down on the next page. Okay. Here we go. Bang, there it is. Cholecalciferol, folks. Okay. Again, don't worry about the intimate details of the chemistry, but I want you to see what these molecules really look like. They are not trivial, are they? They are complicated beasts. So let's go up here and take a look at 7-dehydrocholesterol. Remember, 7-dehydrocholesterol was their starting material and had these 4 rings of fused carbon atoms. Do you notice that some of these rings are actually broken and opened apart in the next molecule? So stare right here at the rings. And now I'm going to go down. Notice that these rings are blown apart, right? They're open. So the absorption of photons of light from the sun is actually altering the structure of this molecule by breaking some of the rings open. And when some of these rings open, we give this new molecule a new name, and we call it cholecalciferol. Okay. All right. So let me shrink this up, and as I do so, I'm going to ask you a question in the chat window. Okay. Here we go. Do you have any old family photos at your house that appear faded with the passage of time? Have you ever looked at an old family photo album from your parents or grandparents where some of the pictures seem kind of dull simply because they're old? Okay. And so you appreciate that when those photos were first printed, they were beautiful and shiny and vibrant, right? And over the passage of time, the coloration has faded. And the reason of that is due to, due to a bleaching effect from the pigments in the photograph absorbing sunlight over time, right? So what I'm saying is the faded photos at your house in your family photo album is a similar analogous process that's happening in your skin with these molecules we're describing between cholecalciferol and the precursor molecule 7-dehydrocholesterol. Okay, this is an example of photochemistry, just like faded photos at your house is an example of photochemistry. Okay. All right, so this process is an example of photochemistry. All right, let's continue here. Next. All right, so when cholecalciferol is manufactured in the skin, remember, some of this is going to happen in the epidermis, some of it's going to happen in the dermis, and we remember from our time talking about the structure of the skin in chapter 5 that in the dermis, you are going to find blood vessels. And so long story short, what's going to happen here is when cholecalciferol is manufactured, it's going to be exported from some of your skin cells and dumped into the blood vessels so that cholecalciferol is placed into the bloodstream. Okay. Cholecalciferol comes down here. Cholecalciferol is exported from your skin cells and placed into the bloodstream. Okay. I'll put in parentheses. Remember, the dermal layer of your skin contains blood vessels. So cholecalciferol, which is manufactured by sunlight striking the surface of your skin, ultimately enters the bloodstream. Once the cholecalciferol is in the blood, your heart is going to contract and circulate your blood throughout your body, right? So anything that's dissolved in the blood is going to be transported throughout the body. So that means cholecalciferol is going to be transported throughout the body every time the heart beats. And its target destination for our conversation is the liver. Cholecalciferol is delivered into the liver through circulation of the bloodstream. Okay. Now, so what's going to happen next is cholecalciferol is delivered to your liver. The cholecalciferol is going to enter your liver cells. And in the liver cells, there are special enzymes who are designed to nibble on the cholecalciferol, kind of like tiny little molecular Pac-Man, right? Remember the old Pac-Man games of many years ago? Okay, Pac-Man is going to nibble on the cholecalciferol and change its structure yet again into a new molecule. Okay. Cholecalciferol will enter liver cells where liver enzymes are waiting to nibble on the molecule and change its structure into something new. The new molecule made is called calcidiol. The new molecule made is called calcidiol. All right, so I'm going to slow down here, right? So we're paying attention to the names of these things. Cholecalciferol is a molecule that we identified in step B. In letter C, the new molecule is calcidiol. And the new location that we're in at this point is the liver, right? Because cholecalciferol is being delivered to the liver. So hopefully the message you're starting to get is, number one, the synthesis of vitamin D is complicated. Number two, the synthesis of vitamin D involves a whole bunch of precursor molecules that originate at different anatomical locations of your body. First, we start with the skin, then we get to the liver via the bloodstream. Okay. All right, so cholecalciferol made in the skin is placed into the bloodstream. It's circulated to the liver. Liver cells absorb cholecalciferol. Enzymes in the liver cells modify the structure of cholecalciferol and build calcidiol. Okay, calcidiol, which I'm going to give you the chemical structure of now. Here we go. Boom. Oh, that's a miserable beast. Look at that thing. That's ridiculous, right? Who wants to study this stuff? Well, very few people honestly want to study this stuff, but we do need some people in society to do it, or else we wouldn't have medications that help us at times. So I can't even fit this whole thing on the screen at one time, can I? So let me shrink this down. There we go. That's a bit better. Okay. All right. So, what I would say is, let's go up to cholecalciferol. We know that cholecalciferol look different from 7-dehydrocholesterol because these ring structures opened up. Okay. If one of the things we can say about the new calcidiol is, it is calcidi, di meaning two iols. The iols are the OH up here at the top and the OH at the bottom. There's two of them, right? That's the calcidiol part of the molecule. Okay, so long story short, the liver is responsible for converting cholecalciferol into calcidiol. Questions right now, other than an impending headache from you, right? So let's continue. We're almost done here. Okay, so calcidiol is made in the liver. Okay, let's continue. I want to move down to the next page. When the liver is finished making the calcidiol, the liver will take the calcidiol and push it back into the bloodstream. The calcidiol is made by the liver. Calcidiol is placed back into the bloodstream. Okay, so again, the heart's going to continue to beat, right? Blood's going to circulate through the body, and calcidiol is going to circulate through the body. The destination of calcidiol is going to be your kidneys, right? You've got two kidneys. So the calcidiol is going to go into both kidneys. Calcidiol is delivered to your kidneys. Okay, so the next stage of our conversation is in the kidneys. Okay, it's kind of like we're taking a cross-country tour across the United States of America, right? And we're stopping at various capitals of various states along the way. All right. So calcidiol is delivered to your kidneys. The kidney cells will take in the calcidiol, and there are different enzymes inside the kidney cells that are going to nibble on the calcidiol and make yet a new molecule. That new molecule is the version of the version of vitamin D, which is responsible for triggering the absorption of calcium, and it is calcitriol. Okay. Calcidiol is calcidiol enters kidney cells where special enzymes again nibble on the calcidiol to make a new molecule. The new molecule is called calcitriol. Okay, so you want to be very careful not to confuse calcidiol with calcitriol. Calcitriol has 3 of those OH groups that I pointed out earlier. Okay, right? Calcidiol up here has 2 OHs at the top and bottom. Calcitriol is going to have 3 of them. Okay, before I bring the structure in, let me highlight to you that calcitriol is the physiologically active version of vitamin D responsible for promoting calcium absorption in the body. Okay. All right, so let's give you the structure of calcitriol here. And here we go. It's going to be a monstrosity, right? But once again, before I shrink it up, notice that it's calcitri, tri suggesting 3 OH groups. We have 1 OH group at the top, and we have 2 here at the very bottom, 1 on the left bottom, 1 on the right bottom. Calcitriol. And there we go, folks. Okay. Now, you might think that our story is done. It's not quite done. Even though we've come to a momentous event, that momentous event is the synthesis of the version of vitamin D that enables your body to absorb calcium. This molecule is currently at the wrong location. Okay, so bear with me here. Okay, next and final stage of our journey. Okay, once calcitriol is manufactured by the kidneys will place the calcitriol back into the bloodstream. And the give us a little bit more space for reading. Once calcitriol is made in the kidneys place the calcitriol into the bloodstream. Once the calcitriol is into the bloodstream, the heart will circulate it throughout the body, but its destination, where it needs to go to do something meaningful, is the small intestine. Okay. The calcitriol is delivered to the small intestine, where the calcitriol will activate special proteins embedded in the plasma membrane of the cells making up the small intestine, which then opens up special channels to allow calcium that's being released from the digestion of your food will then enter the small intestine. And of course, the calcium enters the small intestine, the calcium passes through the small intestine into the blood vessels surrounding the kidneys, surrounding the small intestine. And the calcium enters the bloodstream at that point. So the calcitriol is delivered to the small intestine, where it binds to special proteins on the surface of small intestine cells, promoting the absorption of calcium from food you are digesting. The absorbed calcium ultimately enters the bloodstream. Okay, folks, so we need to highlight the fact that the absorption process is taking place at the small intestine, right? So calcitriol is delivered to the small intestine, and it triggers yet another fairly complicated sequence of chemical events, which ultimately leads to the absorption of calcium from the food you're digesting in your GI tract, and that calcium eventually is pumped. It's put into the bloodstream. Okay. All right, folks. So let me summarize very quickly what we've done here. We're talking about the synthesis of vitamin D. Vitamin D is a family of molecules. There's only one member of the family which is physiologically relevant for the absorption of calcium. That's calcitriol. Okay. It all starts in your skin with a substance called 7-dehydrocholesterol, which itself originates from cholesterol molecules in your body. Hence these fused rings of carbon atoms I pointed out. Sunlight strikes the surface of your skin and bumps into the 7-dehydro molecules and changes their structure into cholecalciferol, which is right before you on the screen. That cholecalciferol is placed into the bloodstream and delivered to the liver, where cells of the liver contain enzymes that nibble on the chemical structure and modify it into something called calcidiol, which is currently on the screen. The calcidiol made in the liver is placed back into the blood and transported to the kidneys. Once the calcidiol reaches the kidneys, the calcidiol is nibbled on with kidney enzymes that change the calcidiol into calcitriol, which is also in front of you at this moment. The calcitriol is placed into the bloodstream and circulated for delivery to the small intestine, where the presence of the calcitriol triggers the absorption of calcium from the food you're digesting, from the food you've eaten. Ultimately, the calcium will filter through the small intestine and enter the capillary beds that enwrap the small intestine so that the calcium can enter the bloodstream itself. So there we have it, folks, right? We've taken a multi-leg journey across the United States. So pretty involved, pretty complicated, but it is understandable if you apply yourself and study. So folks, do you have any questions about this that you'd like to ask? think about every time you or anybody else goes to a doctor, a medical doctor, and says, I've got a problem. I've got an infection in the skin. I've got this or that. Think about the immense complexity of processes that the doctor has to have at least a decent understanding of to try to help therapeutically cure your situation, or at least reduce the symptoms and severity of your situation, right? I mean, there's so much complicated stuff with the body. It's just insane. All right, folks. So this is the first half of our conversation today, the synthesis of the physiologically active version of vitamin D, calcitriol, responsible for promoting the absorption of calcium from your food. All right, so we've got the first half done. Let's do the second half. All right, the second half is we need to talk about the maintenance of calcium homeostasis in the blood. You know, down here at the bottom, right? What did we say in the last point? We said the absorbed calcium is ultimately enters the bloodstream. Okay, so I'm going to start a new heading here. Calcium homeostasis in the body. All right. So let me give you some background on this. Okay. Let me say just a couple things here. You appreciate, I mean, you're getting to a point of sophistication that you understand enough to be dangerous, right? You understand enough to maybe confuse yourself at times, because that's easy to do. We've been talking a lot about the composition of bones here in chapter 6. We talked to you a lot about the extracellular matrix, and we appreciate that the extracellular matrix, at least in part, is made of crystallized mineral salts, which includes calcium salts. So we expect that calcium is stored in the extracellular matrix of our bones. It is. That's correct. That's true. But I'm here to tell you that in terms of calcium levels in the body, the levels of calcium in the body that the body wants to support correct physiology, so that muscles can contract properly, so that neurons can release neurotransmitters properly. The level of calcium in the body that the body needs for physiology is measured, monitored, and adjusted in the bloodstream. Okay, so while calcium is stored in the extracellular matrix of bone, it is actually the blood where the levels of calcium are monitored and adjusted. By the body to support healthy physiology. Okay. It is actually the blood where the levels of calcium are monitored and adjusted by the body to support healthy physiology. Okay, so I'm going to underline that entire catchphrase. Even though there's a lot of calcium in the structure of our bones, the actual concentration of calcium needed to support physiology is measured, monitored, adjusted in the bloodstream. Okay, so at this point, I would turn your attention. I'm going to put this as a figure in your notes. I would turn your attention on pages 195 and 196. Now, I have the physical version of the textbook, and again, I've noticed that the physical version might be slightly misaligned with page numbers relative to your digital version, but somewhere around figure 6.10, a little bit before it probably, you should see some text, and there should be a heading which says 6.7 Bone's role in calcium homeostasis. Bone's role in calcium homeostasis. Let me ask in the chat window. Do you see bone's role in calcium homeostasis in your textbook? Okay, good. I'm very encouraged that you are seeing that. So this is the area that I'm now talking about. Okay, and so this section and including the information of figure 610, which I'm going to put here in your notes. I'm going to reference it. 6.10 are very important for you to begin to understand. Okay. All right, so calcium is stored in the bones, but the actual monitoring of important physiology of calcium happens in the bloodstream. So let's do this. We're going to describe how the body will respond when calcium levels are too low in the blood and when they're too high in the blood. Okay, so when calcium is too low in the bloodstream, what happens? Okay, well, we can describe this to you. All right. So I'm looking at figure 6.10 at the moment. Okay. And so I'm going to encourage you to really pick apart figure 6.10 during your private study time. And I'm going to give you some notes about that at this moment. Okay. When your body detects that blood calcium is too low, what's going to happen? Well, your body's going to try to respond to that condition of too low blood calcium. Here's what the body will do. The parathyroid glands, which are located on the posterior surface of your thyroid glands, are going to release a special hormone. So just take a moment and look at figure 6.10 if you can. I'm going to ask you a question in the chat window. Here we go. In figure 6.10, what color are the parathyroid glands? What color are they? Okay, thanks, Karen, for participating. I appreciate it. Thanks, Kendall. Okay, so, okay, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And let you know that you're close, but you're not quite right. Okay, they are green. They are green. Do you see those green little egg-like structures embedded in the flesh of the pink thing that you're looking at? Do you see the green? Okay, the parathyroid glands are green. Okay, so okay. Do you see the green parathyroid glands? Okay, these little green blobs in the pink. Okay, so the pink thing that you're looking at is your thyroid glands. Okay, the little green blobs are the parathyroid glands. Okay, all right. So when calcium is too low, the parathyroid glands, which are the green little blobs in figure 6.10, okay, they're going to release parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid glands release parathyroid hormone, which triggers the following events. Which triggers the following, okay? The parathyroid hormone released from the parathyroid gland in response to blood calcium levels being too low. The parathyroid hormone will stimulate osteoclast to increase calcium resorption from the extracellular matrix of bone. Okay. The osteoclasts, remember, these are the bone resorbing cells. So the osteoclasts will pull calcium out of the extracellular matrix and deposit it back into the bloodstream. So we pull calcium from our bone matrix and put it into the bloodstream because we want the calcium levels to go back up. Okay. In addition to this, not only are osteoclasts going to do their thing to help raise blood calcium levels, parathyroid hormone will also be delivered to the kidneys, and the kidneys are going to respond in two ways. The kidneys will do two things, okay? In response to the parathyroid hormone, the kidneys will secrete less calcium in the urine, okay? You know, what makes learning A&P so hard is because there's so much interrelated, interconnected things, and there's major topics we haven't talked about yet, right? We haven't talked about the kidney system, and honestly, you're not going to talk about it till A&P 2. So in many ways, as hard as this is, you don't really start to understand the body until you've been through A&P 1 and 2 completely first, and then you go back and review, and then you go back and review, okay? So I understand it's hard. You're not alone. The feelings you're having of frustration, totally normal. You just can't give up. So the kidneys will secrete less calcium in the urine. Remember that your kidneys are responsible for forming your urine, and they do so by filtering the bloodstream. So in moments of your life when calcium levels are actually too high in the bloodstream, what will happen is some of the calcium will be put back into the extracellular matrix of the bone. And if the blood calcium is even too high still, even after putting extra calcium in the bone, then your body will get rid of the excess calcium by filtering it out of the bloodstream in the kidneys, and you actually pee it out of the body. You will pee calcium out of the body as calcium dissolved in your urine. So in our part of the conversation right now, the parathyroid gland will release parathyroid hormone, which triggers the kidneys to secrete less calcium in the urine. Remember, kidneys make urine by filtering blood plasma. And secondly, the presence of the parathyroid hormone will stimulate the kidneys to make a special substance which allows the body to absorb more calcium from the diet. So let me ask you, here we go in the chat window. What substance will the kidneys make to enable the body to absorb more calcium? Okay, I have another question for you. Are you feeling overloaded right now? Okay. Okay, so some of you say yes, some of you say no. Brittany, thanks for guessing at an answer. Keratin is not correct. So let's go back to my original question. What substance will the kidneys make to enable the body to absorb calcium? We just talked about it over the last half hour. Think about it, folks. What substance? What molecule? Well, hey, Noah. All right, take a look at Noah's answer in the chat window. It's calcitriol. Do you see the connectedness here? The parathyroid hormone, which is made in response to low blood calcium, will trigger the kidneys to boost its production of calcitriol. So increased production of calcitriol to enable the body to absorb more calcium from food and drink. Okay. If our blood calcium is too low, doesn't it make sense that we want to optimize and enhance the amount of calcium we might take in when we eat and drink foods and liquids? Okay. So that's what I was fishing for, folks, and trying to get you see that this is a giant spider web of many different connected dots, connected nodes, connected threads of the spider web. Okay. All right. So long story short, when blood calcium is too low, the parathyroid glands release parathyroid hormone that stimulates resorption of calcium from the extracellular matrix of the bone. That calcium is placed back into the blood. The kidneys will secrete less urine, will secrete less calcium in the urine. And that statement basically means that whatever calcium is present in the blood, the body's going to hold on to it. It's not going to filter it out. So that's going to be sure that we don't make the problem worse by secreting calcium out into the urine when we need the calcium. At the same time, the kidneys will boost their production of calcitriol so we can more efficiently absorb calcium in any food and drink that we might be consuming. Questions right now? Okay. You are all capable of understanding this. What makes it hard is there's a foreign, odd, new vocabulary, and there's lots of it. And that I communicate things in a sciencey, technical way, not an everyday language way. Okay. All right. Well, okay. Let's take the next thing here. 3. When calcium is too high in the bloodstream, what happens? Okay. When calcium is too high in the bloodstream, the thyroid gland, okay, the thyroid gland, okay, so let me ask you a question in the chat window here. In figure 610, what color are the thyroid glands? Okay, good. Yeah, they are. They're the pink things, right? They're the pink things. So the thyroid glands are pink, the parathyroid glands are green. When calcium is too high in the bloodstream, what happens? Okay, here's what happens. The thyroid gland produces a different hormone called calcitonin. Okay. The thyroid gland produces and releases calcitonin, which triggers the following things to occur. Okay, the calcitonin will stimulate osteocytes to deposit excess calcium from the bloodstream back into the extracellular matrix of bone. Now, remember when we were talking about bone cells a lecture or two ago, we talked about deposition being carried out by osteoblasts, resorption being carried out by osteocytes, osteoclasts, resorption carried out by osteoclasts. And we had mentioned osteocytes. Osteocytes are your bone maintaining cells. Well, part of the function of the osteocytes will be to place excess calcium back into the matrix if there's too much calcium in the blood supply. So the thyroid gland releases calcitonin, which triggers osteocytes to deposit excess calcium back into the extracellular matrix of bone. Okay, so in this instance, the osteocytes are going to do the deposition, not so much the osteoblasts. Okay. In addition to this, the calcitonin is going to stimulate your kidneys to actually secrete more calcium in the urine that leaves your body. In other words, the calcitonin is going to tell the kidneys, filter more calcium out of the blood, put it into the urine so we can discharge it from the body. Okay. All right, so let's go over this again. When calcium is too high in the bloodstream, the thyroid glands will release calcitonin. Okay, this triggers the osteocytes to deposit excess calcium from the bloodstream back into the extracellular matrix. Maybe I should put some of that in here. To deposit excess calcium from the blood back into the extracellular matrix of bone. And the calcitonin will also trigger the kidneys to increase its filtration of calcium out of the bloodstream as it manufactures the urine. That way, when you pee the urine out of your body, you're getting rid of the calcium. Okay. All right, folks. Now, believe me, this story can get even more complicated. It can, and it is, but I'm choosing to stop here. Okay. For example, now we're talking about homeostasis of calcium being monitored in the bloodstream. What actually monitors calcium levels? Well, folks, calcium levels are going to be monitored by a group of neurons in your brain. So brain physiology is involved here, you know. So long story short, and I'm not going to put this into your notes because I'm not going to test you on it. Calcium levels in the bloodstream are measured by special neurons in the brain. If the special neurons in the brain detect abnormalities in blood calcium levels, then the nervous system will respond by communicating to the appropriate target organs, either the parathyroid glands in the case of low calcium, or thyroid glands in the case of elevated calcium, causing these target organ glands to release hormones, which then elicit the effects we've just documented in your notes. Okay, so the calcium levels are monitored in the bloodstream. They are measured from neurons in the brain. The neurons then communicate to the target organs to release certain hormones so the rest of the body can take actions to counteract the subsequent conditions, such as too low or too high blood calcium. Okay, folks, do you have questions? You might ask yourself, why does this have to be so damn complicated? I get it. I get it. It is really complicated. Okay. Folks, thanks for your time and energy on that. If there's no questions, I'm done with chapter 6. Okay, done with chapter 6. All right. And as I said, later today, I will be releasing study guide for lecture exam 2. Okay, so lecture exam 2 will be on chapters 5 and 6 and 9 and 10. 5, 6, 9, and 10. So we have 2 more chapters to cover in 2 weeks before you get to your actual lecture exam. Let's get chapter 9 started. Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is joints. Okay, now when I say a joint, I'm not talking about those things you folks are smoking at home. I'm talking about where two bones of the skeleton come together. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So let's talk about chapter 9 here. Chapter 9 starts page 269, 270, somewhere in that vicinity of your textbook. All right, and before I go any further, I want you to be aware of something from chapter 9 because, I know it's easy to build up a lot of stress and anxiety in this course because it seems overwhelming with everything. Our focus on chapter 9, the focus on chapter 9 is getting you to understand the different kinds of joints that we find in your body and to understand the basic motion of the joints when the muscles contract. Okay, that's our major purpose of chapter 9. Our purpose of chapter 9 is not to cover additional joint anatomy. Okay, so just if you could with me with your textbook at home, I want to point out that chapter 9 contains quite a bit of anatomy of joints, of which by and large you are not responsible for. So just follow along with me. If you could please turn to figure 9.11. Okay, here's a question in the chat window. What joint is described in figure 9.11? What is that joint called? What joint is described in figure 9.11? Okay, thank you, Courtney. How about someone else? Okay, thanks, Karen. All right, so just so that you all see it, right? It's the temporomandibular joint. And maybe you remember, studying the temporomandibular joint for lab exam 1. And so here is the section of your book that goes over some of the structure of that joint. Folks, you are not responsible for this on lecture exam 2. I'm not going to have detailed anatomy questions about the temporomandibular joint. Not going to have it, okay? Figure 9.12 is the shoulder joint. There it is. It looks pretty. I'm not going to test you on it. Figure 9.13. Figure 9.13 is the elbow joint. There it is. It looks pretty. I'm not going to test you about the anatomy of the elbow joint. Not going to be on your exam. Figure 9.14 is the hip joint. There it is. It looks magnificent. Not going to be on your lecture exam. Figure 9.15 is the knee joint. Wow, fantastic. Beautiful thing. Not going to be on your lecture exam. So here's what I want you to know. For chapter 9, you are not responsible for the joint anatomy. You are not responsible for it. Okay, I'm not going to ask you detailed questions about detailed anatomy of these joints on lecture exam 2. You will not be tested on it. So while I would encourage you to read through it once during your private study time, don't make it a major focus of your study efforts, okay? Don't do that. What I want from you from chapter 9 is please focus your study time on understanding the types of joints in the body and the motion terms describing how the body moves at the joints when muscles contract. So you remember this, we kind of did this in lab a few weeks ago when we were looking at some of the skeletal muscles, right? And, if I have my arms locked straight out with my elbows here, right? And if I bend at my elbows, the palms of my hand come towards my face. And we said that that was a flexion motion, right? Coming up like this towards my face is flexion. When my biceps brachii contract, when my biceps brachii relax and my triceps brachii contract, I do the opposite or opposing motion, which is extension. Okay, that's what I want you to focus on in this chapter. That's what I'm going to test you on in chapter 9. That's what I want you to understand. Okay, all right. So we didn't get quite as far here as I hoped today, but it's okay. We can get caught up. We're okay. Folks, do you have any questions right now? Okay, folks, thank you for your time, your energy, your work, and your persistence. Have a good day, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Okay, take care.